In this session, communities that have completed projects will share details of how they approach the project, what they learned along the way, and they're also going to discuss the benefits of having a more sustainable building, the benefits to the wider community, and any plans that they have for the future. Like I say, I'm just going to do a brief introduction just now. We'll introduce the community groups shortly as well, and at the end we'll have a Q&A session. So who are we? So we deliver the Scottish Government's Community and Renewable Energy Scheme via Local Energy Scotland. Local Energy Scotland is a consortium comprising of Changeworks, the Energy Agency, Energy Savings Trust and SCARF. So we currently have a focus on decarbonising community buildings. There's lots to do to meet the Scottish Government's heating and building strategy. In terms of community groups, that's 50,000 non-domestic buildings by 2030, so big challenge. But what I would say is community buildings can be exemplars for new technologies. They allow people to see technologies that we could all, in various shapes or forms, put into our own homes. And we're supporting buildings that often provide critical community services to be affordable to heat and power them in the long term. And basically, communities and people are the key to meeting these targets. So we've got around a funding open just now, the Let's Do Net Zero Community Buildings Fund. The focus is on decarbonising community, charity and faith buildings. Up to 80% of costs are available, capped at £80,000 per site, focusing on heat, renewables and energy efficiency. The funding is open until March 2025. Projects would normally have 12 months to complete following approval. I've got a team of development officers and technical support staff available on hand also. So in terms of eligible buildings and groups, so village halls, community centres, community hubs, sports facilities, faith buildings, and so we'd normally look for constituted non-profit distributing community organisations, charities, that are established and operating across a geographically defined community. And we can also look at unincorporated organisations, but we need to talk that through with your development officer. Okay, so items that are improvements that are eligible for funding. So core measures would be like heat pumps, air, ground or water source. Connections to a heat work are also eligible as well in this call. Solar or PV panels, if the heating requirement's been met. Also looking at solar water heating, again if the heating requirement's been met. And we can support add-on measures which include energy storage, heat, thermal or electrical, insulation or non-intrusive measures like lofts, underfloor or cavity wall insulation, secondary glazing, draft proofing, replacement, bulbs, LEDs, smart controls. But the key fund requirements are that you're going to be installing one of these core measures as part of your project, which is either going to be like heat pumps or connections to to a heat network, or your building could already have like heat pump connection to heat network, direct electric heating, which includes storage heating and electric boilers, and biomass heating. So we're not just about funding. We've got a recently expanded team of local development officers providing support. We have technical advisors and consultants who can provide support. We've got various resources available. The website has case studies, reports, downloadable guides. We can also help you with getting a referral to Business Energy Scotland to get like a free audit, a free assessment, and some recommendations. And we can also give you an update on any other potential funding streams that are available as well. Okay, so I am going to stop sharing now, and I'm going to hand you over to my colleague Bryce, who is going to introduce our first speaker this afternoon.
Excellent, thank you, Stephen. Just a very quick note from me, folks, before I introduce the speakers to you today. If you have any questions that crop up during, if you could please hold them till the end. We will run a Q&A session at the end, as Stephen said. If you think you forget them, stick them in the chat as well. I'll just monitor that as we go and read them out as we get to the end. But first up, we have Philip Blay from the Aboyne men's shed for you. Philip, I'll hand over to you, and I believe you're sharing your photos as well as we go. Over to you, Philip.
Right, well, good afternoon, everybody. As I said, I'm the treasurer of the Aboyne District men's shed 2016. It became a charity a year later, and we remained 9 to 10 trustees until August last year. Now, probably most people know what men's sheds are. Well, they're basically organisations that are there to promote the health and well-being of men. They're usually centred around a workshop with an informal meeting area. That's the general format all over the UK and quite a lot in Australia as well. They're places for practical activity, learn new skills, or just to socialise and have a chat once or twice a week. And they've been quite successful in Scotland, championed by Jason Schroeder, who's the chief executive of the Scottish Men's Shed Association, who works to promote these organisations. They usually, but not exclusively, used by retired men. The setup we have here in Aboyne is slightly different, and we operate as a community shed and are open to local constituted groups. We operate here. It's a community facility, facility for the community. Right, getting on a bit more towards the project, which you're probably a bit more interested in, is despite COVID, we managed to finish the Aboyne and Mid Deeside community shed. It was delayed quite a bit by COVID. We just managed to get the solar PV on the roof when Boris Johnson stood up and told us to all stop at home. And it's taken quite an uphill struggle from there to get the project finished. It caused quite a few complications on the financial side as well. But what I'm going to do now is show you. Right, I assume you can all see this picture of the shed. That is what it's looked like near completion. As you can see, we have a ground floor, it's block construction, and an upper floor timber frame and the solar PV array on the roof. The upper floor is accessed by this bridge. As you can see, it's in a slight depression, which is an old sand quarry, so it was a brownfield site, and it's surrounded in mixed woodland. So the ground floor is a multi-purpose workshop which has just been kitted out over the past year from machines and tools and stuff donated locally. Upstairs there's a social area. This is it's a soft furnished, it's laid out actually for an art exhibition the artist in residence was doing a couple of weeks ago. This is for informal meeting of groups. Also upstairs we've got a trainer kitchen, which all electric, and and it's meant for training. It hasn't got any commercial equipment in it. It's meant for training people with domestic appliances. And I'll say a bit more about this. I think probably you've all seen these. These are air source heat pumps, which service 4 of the 5 rooms within the building. Right. Yeah, all these rooms that I've described here are open for rent by community groups. I'll be talking a bit more about that later. Right. Right. How did we come to build something like that? Well, initially we looked around the village. We were just a group of 6 or 7 guys looking for a building, a site or a building that we could have as a meeting place and set up a little workshop. There were several locations, but none of them all had drawbacks or problems, which were pretty well showstoppers. And at the outset, the local laird offered us land, but we discounted that as we didn't want to go to the building project. However, things changed. A rep from the Leader Fund arrived on the scene looking for suitable projects. Now, I assume quite a lot of you know what Leader is, but for those who don't, it was basically EU money set aside all around, I think probably Europe, but definitely in the UK, for grant assistance for sort of rural development projects. They're quite wide-ranging. But in this particular area, which we're in Aboyne, it was managed by SALAG, South Aberdeenshire Local Action Group, who were tasked with allocating, I think it's probably over £1 million in this area for projects here. But for us, we sort of had indications that were very interested in what we were doing, and it was a game changer for us, as there was a good chance we could access 50% or more of the build costs. So we then set to work to make a shed, and it quickly became evident that we should make it a community shed, because we did quite a lot of research. Obviously, before you can embark on a project of this scale, you have to start doing some project planning. And in part of the project planning, we had to sort of size the project, how many rooms, who's going to use them, that sort of thing. And you had to look at demographics and also sounding out the local funding environment. I must say, Aberdeenshire Council Mar Area Committee were very supportive in this area and gave us finance to kick the project off. But absolutely fundamental to any sizable project is a business or a project plan. You can't really go very far without one, and you definitely won't get funding if you can't show a degree of planning and that your project's going to be viable. We did produce a project plan. It's quite 38 pages long, 48 titles and 10 tables. So it's quite a document, but any project should really have one, and it's really useful for when you're making funding applications to cut and paste from a document like that that's been well researched and written. Fortunately for us, we had several trustees who had project management experience, myself included, but clearly you can't just sit down and write a project plan, but you can sketch out the main features and start to see what's needed to make the project viable and minimise the surprises which inevitably come along. Yeah, this is really a disciplined way to do projects. One of the key features that became evident right from the start was sustainability. Funders need sustainability, and it is morally responsible on us to, we're going to create something for the long term to make it sustainable and have as low carbon footprint as possible. We quickly developed a 6-point plan for sustainability, which I'll come on to later. Part of our research, we went out and discussed with other village halls and local groups And what became evident was that Hall said heating costs were really high and were a major cost driver for what the rents were going to be. And groups said invariably meeting rooms were cold in winter and generally not suited to small groups of 8 to 20 people, all those really needing site storage. So with this in mind, we developed an energy policy based on long-term sustainability, and there was also assistance to the architect who then had to produce a design. We gave him a rough idea of what we needed, and he had to produce a design to the lowest carbon footprint our budget would allow. Having said that, the building regulations do drive you towards an energy performance certificate rating of A or better. We didn't feel we could go for zero carbon, but we did get A in our particular project. Going on to our choice of energy sourcing, we looked at renewables, but we were in the site, as you probably saw, was in a low-level wooded area and not particularly good for wind. And any ground source boreholes could have been viable, but the landowner was quite emphatic. He didn't want to have boreholes on that particular land. But really, we're only left with solar PV. Unfortunately, the roof of the building does face due south, so that gave us a good opportunity, and the trees weren't too much of a problem. So we developed this 6-stage plan, which I'm now going to. This was our optimization plan. To design a building and meet minimum energy performance certification level A. Install 3-phase mains power and a 3-phase solar PV array. Well, we initially thought we didn't need single phase, but we found you could actually, because we got to have a new cable from the mains, it wasn't actually that much more expensive to go 3-phase. But the advantage of going 3-phase is that we could triple the amount of solar PV the electricity authorities allow you to put on your roof. Most of you know if you've got a house, you can limit it, I think, to 4 kilowatts. If you've got 3-phase, you can put 12 kilowatts on your roof. So that's what we've got. The other one is space heating. Is the biggest facility. We looked at wet systems, but they were very expensive to install. The yoga and the people who lay on the floor a lot like wet systems, but we decided to go for an air blast system. It's air source heat pumps, but they drive ceiling mounted heat exchangers. We decided to go hot water, not from a tank system, but just to local instantaneous, because the hot water demand's basically very low, and just for hand washing and perhaps the occasional extra use in the kitchen. Optimization point 4 was to, once we're up and running, was to monitor energy consumption to optimize a future battery bank. This was to eliminate the overnight standing load import. We do over a year we use about 1,000 kilowatts, keeping the refrigerator going. Use power overnight, so we want to choose a battery system which will use the excess solar power to negate this overnight standing load which we have to import. And that is what item 5 is put the battery bank in. Item 6 is we want to put a non-fossil. We have water system which comes from a well, and we have a sewage system of our own. So we're not connected to the mains apart from the power supply, the three-phase power supply. So we're looking at putting a system in, and we can't really find anything that suits our needs at the moment. So that's work in progress. Yeah, I think. Just get on some facts. The day we've been operating a year, and yeah, our energy, I think, yeah, it was well, it cost £884. We were open 6 days a week for 45 hours a week, but we do get a feed-in tariff because we managed to install the solar panels before that option closed, and we're getting an income of about £580 a year. So our net energy costs for the building was last year was £264. It was only about 4% of our operating costs. So I feel quite comfortable at, even though it's going to in the next few weeks. About yeah, the use, particularly the air source heat pumps and the air blast units. These are all remotely programmable, and because we have a quite sporadic lets, we don't have it continuously used. It's odd hours through the day, although it is open most of the mornings for 5 days a week. So we only heat the rooms 15 minutes before they're used. We keep the upstairs at a base temperature of 16 degrees and just boost it up to whatever the group wants it to be. Yeah, obviously we set a temperature of each room, but because of these air blast units, it also incorporates a cooling feature. So should the temperature get above the preset, the cooling kicks in. And this feature was particularly welcomed by exercise groups and those meetings during the summer heat wave. It's a bit of a plus. Of course, because it's during the day, we're not importing power to do that cooling feature. We found the 12 kilowatts is way and above what the demand is today. Now, just to go on some about some costs of what it did to build that shed. In cash terms, it took us £429,400 odd pounds, of which 46% or 160,000 came in private money. That's from grant funders, obviously not public. And almost exactly the same amount came from public grants like SALAG, and some of the local authorities helped us out. We had 8%, which was 36,000 in donations from local well-wishers, which was quite remarkable. The other key feature was that we were particularly well supported by local businesses and professionals who gave an estimated 64,000 in pro bono value, and that excludes trustees' hours. The support was very diverse, from farmers hanging gates to stonemasons making a sign, and VAT consultants, and many other local tradesmen who just went that little bit extra to give us anything like this. The tip here is use local tradesmen wherever you can. Our typical rent costs for a room are £12 an hour. That may have to go up £1 or £2 with the electricity increase that we've just been advised of, but it is a slight increase, but we think it won't be too bad for us. So that's a run through of the project and how it fared. Yeah, we're very happy with the heating, the instant water heating, and the general operation. Not only do we have the remote ability to remotely set the temperature of the rooms, but also we've got we can see all the CCTV external cameras for security as well. We also have fibre connection for internet and use VoIP phones. We do have an arrangement with another charity, the Mid-Deeside Community Trust, who uses the office space in the mornings for 5 days a week and answers the phones for us and passes on messages as required. Main learning points is at the outset have a clearly defined energy policy, both source and usage, and of course it should be part of a detailed business project plan. Size your project to local demand, do your research and find out what people want and what's missing in your community. We tried not to replicate the rooms and spaces available within the village. I don't think we've taken demand away from the other spaces, but increase the availability for small and fledgling groups to meet. The third thing is engage with the local community and local funders. We had regular stands at the Aboyne Highland Games, farmers markets, car boot sales on the village green, and that really stood us in good stead, keeping the public informed of what we're doing and getting input from what they would like to see in the shed. So that's my my talk finished. There's any questions?
Hi, thanks very much, Phil. That was great. I think what we'll do is we're gonna have Barbara come on, and we're going to do a wee question and answer session at the end, if that's okay with everyone. But thanks very much. Really appreciate that. Really good.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Philip. I will just change over the camera. Bear with me 2 seconds, sorry. And next up we have Barbara Gray. Sorry, technology was not working for me there. Barbara, over to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bryce. Good afternoon, everybody. Well, I represent Findon Hall in Kilbokie in the Black Isle. Very much a typical village hall with a variety of usage, from community market, a local panto, regular badminton, kids groups, music groups, Pilates, variety of exercise groups, the usual things for a village hall. And our village is 6 miles from Dingwall, which is the nearest town, but it is also serviced by Inverness, which is 20 minutes away. The bus service to both is variable, not good, and not good from an activities point of view. So you're not going to be able to go for a 1 hour class to either destination, because you're not going to be able to get back on public transport. So in terms of decarbonising our village hall, we're keen to provide a variety of activities, both for and for a variety of people, variety of needs, to reduce transport sources of carbon. And also, a lot of these groups are working to very tight budgets, we need to provide the space at a minimal cost to them. And so the village hall is run by a management committee of entirely volunteers. I think, Bryce, you're going to show a picture for me of what the village hall looked like 3 years ago, before we started our work on it. Basically, our old tiled roof was disintegrating. There was work. The hall was heated by a pellet boiler, but that was giving us a lot of problems in terms of maintenance, but also just regular breakdowns, the cost of pellets and so on. I'll speak more about that in a moment. The noise in the background, by the way, is one of my cats who's decided that they're trying to get into the room, but I'm going to ignore them and hopefully they'll go away. Yes, so the old tiled roof was disintegrating. So we're keen to install environmentally friendly measures in our upgrades of the hall, which, as you mentioned earlier, village halls are are very visible within the communities and can act as an example, hopefully, in the area for people installing other environmentally friendly measures and encourage transport to be low carbon as well. So the first thing we had to do was to research our options in how we could improve the building, and we went to a variety of seminars. We transitioned Black Isle at an online group and also an active community group locally, which provided seminars like this one very much on how people had practically improved their buildings. We attended that. The Pebble Trust produced a great book called Sustainable Renovation, and they also provide funding and advice. Of course, we came to Local Energy Scotland, Zero Waste Scotland, and Resource Efficient Scotland. And it was in this phase that we were recommended to have an assessment done on our building, which was carried out by Resource Efficient Scotland to assess the measures that would be worthwhile for improvements to our building. So insulation was going to be essential, as our old roof was not going to be window or watertight for much longer. In fact, it had various ingresses of water. The tiles were literally crumbling. And insulation-wise, it was very poor. So at the risk of stating the obvious, Philip was obviously dealing with a brand new building. We're dealing with an old building from the 1970s. You have to look at the building you've got. In their case, in the case of the main shed, of course, they were able to install solar, and we likewise were looking at solar as well. But in some instances, that's just not going to be appropriate if you're overshadowed by trees. But like the main shed, we were also south and southeast facing, so we were primed for solar. And the ground source, you need the ground around you as well. So you've got to deal with the building that you've actually have. Also, you're probably not going to be able to do all you would like to do at once. It's going to have to be phased in terms of funding and practicality of getting work done, even if that's possibly not the most efficient way to do it. So we started with the insulation of our roof as a priority, which was included in our first Resource Efficient Scotland report. And we also installed a recycled and donated cycle shelter in 2020. This was in 2020. And we insulated the walls of our small committee room. we got funding for this from a variety of sources. We'd been fundraising for years as a community and committee, because we knew that the roof was grim. So we had our own fundraising, but we also at this point registered for gift aid, so that when we got donations from individuals, we got money back there via the tax. So we then got private donations from individuals again. We got donations of time and money from local companies, and that was tremendous, because some of it in the feasibility phase, you've not actually got funding for anything. So the architect, engineer and so on that assessed the roof and drew plans for the roof, that was all pro bono, and we were very, very fortunate with that, because at that point you don't know the scale of what you're asking for in order to get a price. It becomes a bit chicken and egg. Also just getting the work, a guide price from them as to what would be done, and that was all done in advance of us applying for grant funding. We received money from the FCC Communities Foundation and also the Energy Savings Trust at this point, including a loan, which we've still got on the roof. And Highland Council also helped us through the discretionary grants. The difficulties in this phase of the work, timing of grant periods, because when you're getting them from different sources, they all have to align to allow you to commission and get the work done in the time that the grant funding allows. Unexpected eventualities, there inevitably are some. One, for example, this one was the plan for the cycle shelter. Bryce, could you put up the cycle shelter picture as well, please? Thank you. So the planning for the cycling shelter, we hadn't anticipated it was out with the size. We needed to go for planning permission for it. But I think you just have to roll with some of these things. You know, you worry about the delays. We got over the delays. We got the planning permission. It was all fine. But there's going to be things that are unanticipated, and certainly we're in the second phase of our work as well. Also, grant funding rules can be different for different organisations. The FCC Communities Trust requires you to, so we've got round figures, 40,000 from them. We had to raise 4,300 to be given to a third-party organisation that hadn't already been raised in our existing fundraising. So that was quite complicated. And also difficult for just to explain, even among ourselves, how that works. But that's the basis that organisation exists, and we got through it. We got the third-party funding. Also, the proportion of funding in a single item on their list, we managed to get a better price between applying for the grant and winning the grant, and then found that we were potentially going to lose the funding because we've got a cheaper price. It was just in the detail of the rules. So I think whenever you go for funding, you need to just go through the fine print as to the rules of that particular funder. And then we had the joy of COVID. So that delayed the start. We were one of the first. It also made complications for us in that we were the first job on site for our building contractor in that time when building was the first out of lockdown. So there was all the changes in working practices, so that, for example, only one company could work in the building at one time, and they were basically feeling their way at the same time as us, because the rules were basically being created. And some bizarre things, we were working on doing work at the toilets at the same time too, and it became that you weren't allowed hand dryers for a certain period because they were aerosol, and then that restriction was then withdrawn. You know, it was lots of little funny requirements within that time. And then, of course, with COVID, as a village hall, we had the lack of income to deal with, which was joyful. Bryce, could you put up picture 1, please, with showing the full roof? Yes. So we now had nicely painted outside walls. We had the front. We'd done various insulation works, the front door and insulating the committee room, insulated the roof. We've got our cycle shelter. So we're wind and watertight at that point. And the world opens up again. And we think, okay, we're going to get really busy. Yeah. Except it doesn't. You know, we're followed by a couple of other lockdowns. And I think they exacerbated the problems that we were already having with our boiler. The boiler had been a wet and a dry system, so it was radiators in the committee room to the front of the building there, along the front also the toilets, and then at the rear of the building the stores, and then inside it was an air system, so it was hot air coming into the main hall. But we'd had lots of problems with it before COVID, in that because of our location, we were being asked for like £500 for travel costs by companies to maintain it. We had lots of breakdowns. There was poor quality pellets was an issue at one point, which led to further maintenance issues. We'd the cost of pellets, which with limited options for supply. Our pellets were coming from Peterhead. So, you know, 3 hours basically, transport costs, and the cost of pellets was going through the roof. But I think it was exacerbated by the on-off of lockdown, and then fewer bookings where it was on and off at several points during the day. We'd reached a stage where we felt we were putting good money after bad, after just at one point spending £2,500 on the boiler, getting it up and running, and then for it to break down again short time afterwards. So eventually we took the decision, we have to find something else here, and we have to switch off the boiler. So we went back to Resource Efficient Scotland to ask for advice, and again they were very helpful. They revised our original report and looked at what we could do now that we had an insulated building. Fortunately, we still had electric radiant heaters. Could you pop the next picture on, Bryce? That's got the yeah. You can see up in the corner there, small little radiant heaters. They look quite small, they're extremely powerful, and they were very old, 30, 40 years old. And they'd been out of use for some time, except to supplement when the boiler was out of action. But what they do is they're actually still very efficient in that they heat the whole space of the hall very quickly. So for yoga, Pilates, that sort of activity, and they heat bodies rather than the whole space. So they were assessed, to my surprise, as still being a very efficient measure. I knew they were effective, but they were also easy to maintain. In that, you know, a normal electrician can replace the elements to them, and very instant and easy to use too. So when you've got a variety of community groups, you just want something that's simple for them to be able to switch on when they need it. So the downside is they use a lot of electricity when they're on. So the thought was to reduce the running cost of these and our other power needs by installing solar PV on the south-facing roof. And Resource Efficient Scotland also recommended an air source heat pump to attach to the existing radiators in the side rooms, so heating our toilets, kitchen, small meeting room and the stores. We agreed, as a committee, we thought this is the logical solution because we can have instant heat in the room that most requires it, and we can have a residual low heat in the toilets, and the small meeting room is now well insulated, and so it can, if we need to increase heat rapidly, it'll be very easy to do, but by and large a lower basic temperature should do very well. So we were then at the stage of asking contractors to come and look, and obviously the contractors are a big source of information as well. And you know, we were willing to, at this stage, we had the advice from Resource Efficient Scotland, and we thought we agreed with it, but also we were open to what the contractors would advise, bearing in mind that they're not always going to be independent. They're going to come up with solutions that their favourite solutions as well as potentially good ones. One had suggested an air conditioning system, but we've got a high roof. It's very good for badminton, but we've no way of putting the pumped air system down low, other than by running fans. It really wasn't going to suit the room, and we'd a bad experience with the air source, with the high level air vents that are in the hall. Another looked at ground source, recommended ground source, but we've got the land around us, but it was going to be massively expensive, and we'd have had to take up our floor and put underfloor in it. It was looking in the range of upwards of 100,000. And some recommended, we looked at installing radiators in the main hall, and Resource Efficient Scotland had said ask the contractors what they think as well. But as you can see, there's seating all along one end of the hall, just a sort of shelf seat, and it was never going to heat the hall in effectively because it wouldn't be big enough, and also it being an older building, there's no access to get under that floor without lifting it. So radiators in the main hall we weren't keen on. But we were happy with I think that when you get the contractors coming out, you also want to chat to them about what combinations and other work they've done. When we had the roof work done, we'd used a single contractor, which was ideal because they then take responsibility for the whole building, and it's much easier than a committee coordinating contractors. And we would have preferred this for the heating, but as things transpired, it wasn't possible to do so. So we then had our preferred solution of the solar PV to minimise our electric costs and the existing electric heating for the hall, which we knew was effective. Then we tried to get quotes. So this was for a submission for September 2021. We'd been trying for weeks. We got the solar PV quotes very quick, or a couple of them very quickly, and we managed to get the solar PV quotes all right. The air source heat pump, however, it was months. It took us months to get the quotes. Locally, there was also funding available at that stage. CARES funding looked like it was closing in this September, and also there was became a small top-up grants available from HIE, Highlands and Islands Enterprise. And I think the local companies were inundated with requests, as well as people realised that, just switching on, pardon the pun, to energy efficient measures. So the local companies were inundated with requests for quotes. Some were telling us that they wouldn't be able to visit for 6 months. Yeah, it was tricky. So in the end, we submitted initially to CARES just based on the solar PV panels, thinking we don't know what the solution is going to be on our air source, but we'll have to get this one in anyway, and we've got the quotes for it. So we submitted for our solar PV. We were also lucky to get a small top-up grant to that from HIE, which was very lucky in the timing. And again, I've got to thank CARES for that, because I was unaware. It depended on you having a CARES award, but also just the information being passed by Daddy from CARES was fantastic. We were also lucky that the whole, as well as having a nice new roof, which we knew that would take the solar, we also had already had a 3-phase electric meter. So that's something to check early on in your journey, is speaking to your power providers and electrical contractors, because that can take quite a while if you don't have the right cable and meter installed. Of course, hiccups are the name of the game when you're running a project, and our major hiccup with the installation here was that because we were then operating a subcontractor, we engaged the services. We were given the services by a local health and safety consultant. He had a look and ran a health and safety audit for us, and recommended an asbestos survey be done. We thought, yeah, okay, we'll get the asbestos survey done, not expecting there to be anything there. There was. So that was a bit of a shocker when people were going into your roof and that we had asbestos, and as not having experienced that, panic. But in fact, it was very straightforward. It was low level. There was a small amount there. We took the advice, spoke to the installers, and they were able to continue with the installation safely. Installation was done by AES Solar of Forres, who we were absolutely delighted with. The weather they were working in January of this year was awful. It was sleet. They thought, how on earth they're going to manage? They did, and yeah, they had it in a couple of days, and we were producing power immediately, which was fantastic. It was, of course, still a very quiet term at the time, as Omicron had reared its head as we thought we were going to get going again in January, and everything was stepping back again. So we now had a way of reducing our electric costs, and we were delighted and very relieved to find that we were able to apply again to CARES for further funding for our air source heat pump, having been unable to get the quotes in the earlier months. We just couldn't believe how persistent you had to be. Even when you had like somebody come out and spend 2 hours looking around the building and asking all the questions, they still didn't produce the actual quotes. They were just so busy. So eventually we did have 3 quotes. I think it must have taken about 4 or 5 months to get 3 actual quotes together. Yeah. And then with the further surprise in planning in this one, in that when we were going for the solar, we I'd spoken to planning and said we're planning solar and the air source heat pump, and I was really surprised when it was, oh, you don't need it for solar, but you do need planning for your air source heat pump, which is different to domestic building. And I think we'd seen so much of all the domestic information out there. We hadn't appreciated as a committee that we needed it for the hall. However, we got planning permission, and that was all in order. I would just also advise people to contact their planning office as soon as they're considering any measures, because that was two things that we could easily have come a cropper on, because both even the installer didn't know that that the air source heat pump was going to need planning. It was very unexpected to them, and in fact they had thought we were going to qualify for the new reduced VAT rate on the air source heat pump, but he was totally unaware of the requirement for the planning permission. Air source heat pump was installed while I was on holiday, B, had COVID and hadn't gone along to the hall, and they installed it in the wrong place. It had, because it had planning permission, there was a specific location. There'd been no problems with the installation. The hall was shut while they were doing the work, so basically they had the drawings. It was just a mistake, and because I wasn't actually there because of having COVID, as had another member of the committee, it was just really unfortunate timing, and it just, again, but that has now been corrected. But it is a reminder to community groups to be on site and just see what the contractors are doing, make sure there's no nothing caught out like that. I think it's learn by others' mistakes. So going ahead, we will hope, well, the solar will minimise the running costs of the air source heat pump as well as the electric heaters. And we haven't, this is only just, the air source heat pump's only just now been installed in the correct place. So we haven't now yet a winter or electric bills to give us an indication, but we know that the electric costs supplemented by the solar, everything is, our costs are well down on what they were with the pellet boiler. So we know that we're going to be better off than we would have been. We're much more confident about the provision and maintenance of our community space than we otherwise would have been. I do think our existing boiler would have bankrupted us had we not had. We couldn't have gone on with the existing system. So in summary, I would say read about all the types of measures available, ask for the report through Local Energy Scotland for your building, ask contractors what they would recommend, but remember that they're not impartial. Always ask your planning office before you apply for any grants. Check in with the contractor during the installation, and there are likely to be major humps along the way, but I hope our story gives you a few, there was a few moments of crises for us when we thought this is a disaster with the asbestos, for example, and then it turned out to be no problem at all. But when committees don't always have the expertise in them that to allow you to understand every situation. Our plans are to continue to try to increase the number of activities and the range of activities offered in the hall. That's having local activities one of the best things we can do to reduce our carbon footprint. We will look to monitor, we're looking to monitor the solar PV in the hope that in the future we may be able to get battery storage. And we also want to look at EV charging in the village, in the hall car park, as a future improvement for the village and the area in terms of reducing the overall carbon footprint. Personally, I would like to see a massive thank you to Barry McSween from CARES and Ryan Felber from Zero Waste Scotland, because between the two of them, they did nurse me through our various panics and how to go about things on the journey. So thank you, Vary and Ryan. And yes, that's the end of my presentation, and happy to answer any questions. Thank you.